Hi guys, welcome to the Vegan Food Scientist. Have you ever wondered what are the health benefits or risks of eating pork? Well, come along as we investigate scientific analysis of pork before you eat pork and put it on your fork. Dating back to 5000 BC, pork has been used as meat and as nutrients for our people. Some cultures eat pork the most of all meats. No matter where you live or what religion you are, pork is the most commonly eaten meat around the world. In a multi-country analysis, China tops the most pigs produced, with the European Union and America rounding the podium. As you can see, in terms of production power, China is astoundingly running the race on pork, 440 million versus 150 million, as you see in this chart here, for units in weight. So, if we eat pork globally, what's the risk? Let's get into it. The number one reason is cholesterol and fat risk. Now, cholesterol is a fatty-like substance that animals have in their muscle tissues. So when we eat them, we're inertly eating it alongside with the protein in an intramuscular fat, and cholesterol is within that food product. Now, cholesterol is not a necessary nutrient, and our bodies make enough of it. Cholesterol is found in animal foods such as meat, especially red meat, pork, chicken, as well as fish, eggs, seafood, and dairy products. So how do we get cholesterol in our veins that accumulate as disease? If we eat too much cholesterol from animal foods, eat saturated or trans fats, we have an increased risk of heart disease. Therefore, due to its disease risk, it is not recommended to consume any type of cholesterol, says the Dietitians of Canada. So again, it is not recommended to consume any level of cholesterol, as it is not a necessary nutrient. Our body makes enough of it, and we do not need to supplement it from our food sources. So do not eat it, and try to cut it out altogether in your meals. Atherosclerosis is hardening of the arteries caused by plaque accumulation in your veins and arteries throughout all of your body. This plaque is contributed by the food that we eat, especially low-density lipoprotein, or LDL bad cholesterol, that from the foods that we eat. Pig steaks, ground pork, pork belly, pork butt, all other pork products contain a high level of cholesterol, which contributes to plaque and atherosclerosis risk. This basically means that if you continue to eat this, you may develop having heart disease and other health problems. So if we were to give ourselves an allowable limit, what would it be? It's looking around for quoted healthy adults, 200 milligrams per day, and for best practices, the limit would be 300 milligrams. So when you have your at-risk population, people that are over 40 on a particularly omnivorous diet their whole life, would be the ones that you would particularly want to help and reduce the cholesterol risk. However, these results are only the best practices and not absolute results. Actually, keeping your limits at 0 milligrams of bad cholesterol is the real aim, as we do not benefit from this cholesterol at all. Here's a table showing the cholesterol of various foods. Pork chops sit at 70 milligrams per 100 milligram serving. Bacon, a breakfast staple on tables worldwide, has a whopping 110 milligrams of cholesterol per 100 gram ration of bacon, which is around 3 slices. So if you think that you only eat 3 slices of bacon per sitting, I think that that's sort of kidding ourselves here. Most people eat a little bit more than 3 slices of bacon per sitting. As we eat more of this per meal, you'll end up toppling your cholesterol levels per day and then getting yourself into a dangerous range. Chronically eating pork will add to your cholesterol risk, and this can lead to hardening of your arteries, higher blood pressure, heart attack, stroke, and heart failure. The bottom line is that all things pigs contain deadly cholesterol that will eventually break your heart. The second main reason as why we should not put pork on our fork is pathogenic risk. So a pathogen is anything that can produce diseases, And there's a lot of scientific evidence showing that pork products have a variety of pathogenic risk. Now, if we're going to say to ourselves, well, how exactly do these pathogens spread into disease and illness for our humans, then we would say that the first stage processing is where the pigs are born and bred and farmed and then slaughtered, rendered into these meat carcasses. The second stage of processing occurs during processing and harvesting of its parts, i.e. pathogens spread through cross-contamination and temperature abuse, where the slicing and processing, such as making hams and hot dogs and sausages. Now, the third stage of processing, where the bacteria grows out of control, it leaves the factory in a packaged state and before it reaches the customer's plates. The time spent in this process allows for these pathogens to grow to a toxic level that can evoke human illness. Alternatively, there are inadequate fermentation, such as dried fermented pork products, canned and packaged, salted and cured, such as bacon, sausage, and deli meats. So if you do these improperly and proper measurements, you'll end up having a pathogenic risk. Contamination of pork by its live animals, equipment, employees, and environment, all of these factors together make it a high-risk food product that you're eating. There are several types of pathogens that can contaminate pork. There are two types, foodborne pathogens and meat-borne pathogens. We will look at foodborne pathogens first. This is taken from the analysis of Canadian top pathogens in processed food industries. We're looking at Salmonella, with pork nearly causing hundreds of reported illnesses and its associations. Now, the associated health implications of Salmonella poisoning acutely can cause mild nausea and diarrhea, gastrointestinal pains, with severe cases causing irreversible immune impairment. Now, Staphylococcus aureus is the second pathogen, which is an enterotoxin with pork. So this bacteria is foodborne, and the health implications can range from nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps, diarrhea, and is usually immediate. So you're going to see staph infections within minutes to hours after eating the contaminated food. So we've covered foodborne pathogens. Now, what is the science saying about meat-borne pathogens? A group of scientists in the Institute of Medical Research in Serbia, the Department of Parasitology and Mycology in Paris, analyzed pork as a source of a human parasitic infection. Now, the researchers stressed that zoonotic parasites transferred from pork consumption to humans is predicted by the Food and Agriculture Organization, or the FAO, as having an 18.5% increase to forecasted increased pork consumption in the next 10 years. These parasites from pork are of important health concern, especially public health concern, as pork is the major job in Europe. Pork production, pork processing is one of the major jobs in Europe, job providers. Perfecting pork is what they do, as almost half of the meat Europeans eat is pigs. Meat and meat products present an ideal base for supporting growth of multiple pathogens and spoilage risk. Now, factors inside the meat, like its acidity content, water activity, make a big difference for growth of these bad microorganisms. All foodborne illnesses can be largely made up of pathogenic bacteria and viruses. These pathogens get transferred to humans through meat, water, and fecal matter. Poo inside the water or the food. Yes, poo is contaminated from your pork products that you would enjoy. Here's a table showing of the parasites en route from pig to humans. Pork can be a special source of growth of meat-borne pathogens such as Toxoplasma gondii, sarcocystic species, and helminths. These are your classic pork tapeworms of undercooked pork products found in the muscle tissues of porks. Now, meat-borne pathogens are of specific importance in pork specifically, as they grow within the muscle tissue of the pork, which then you ingest. So you ingest these tiny baby microorganisms that will eventually grow into tapeworms in your body. Now, toxoplasmosis is a global pathogen, estimated to infect 1/3 of all humans worldwide. The main side effect to humans includes headaches, can include epilepsy, paralysis, and chronic infection, as well as death. Toxoplasma gondii can be considered the most significant protozoan foodborne agent and the most significant that is meat-borne now. This disease burden is the greatest of all parasitic infections, similar to the foodborne illnesses such as Salmonella and Campylobacter species. So if you take Salmonella and Campylobacter species and say, well, wow, there's lots of people globally that get infected with this, you can compare this to Toxoplasma gondii. The life cycle of Toxoplasma gondii, or any toxoplasmic species, starts as this life cycle here. Most from feline hosts and pigs as a co-host. The pigs get the parasite growing from these passed on, and then actively it goes into humans. Due to the high rate of pigs and prevalence of parasites, pork is considered the highest risk meat. There are also tapeworms that are from pig species that is of significant human importance. This is a severe disease, as a tapeworm can lead to death in those that are infected. Raw pork or undercooked pork is ingested containing the larvae. The larvae grow in the muscle fibers of us and can take control of our muscle fiber, staying alive in a nurse cell for months up to years. The research concludes that safe pork is not an unachievable goal, but to maintain as safe as possible, will continue to control the levels of these pork-borne pathogens. So pork-borne pathogens, we have to just moderate it because it's a reality inside of these products. So next up, let's check out what the doctors have to say about toxoplasmosis and mental health versus the consumption of pork at Dr. Greger's video at nutritionfacts.org. Let's check it out.
Toxoplasma is a brain parasite that may infect 1 million Americans every year, making it a leading cause of severe foodborne illness in the United States. Nearly 1/4 of adults and adolescents in the United States have already been infected. Newly acquired infections in a pregnant woman can be devastating, but in most people with intact immune systems, these parasites just sit there in your brain in a fine-tuned balance between the parasite and your immune system, just laying in wait hoping you'll get AIDS or something, and your immune system will slip, and it can come raging back and spread throughout the brain. But in healthy, non-pregnant individuals, the parasite just sits there long-term as a potentially lifelong resident of your brain, kept at bay by your immune system, without any significant clinical consequence. And so chronic toxoplasma infection is viewed as a benign condition, until now. This absence of overt symptoms has contributed to the view that the cysts in your brain formed by the parasites are dormant entities. But recent developments directly challenge the notion that chronic toxoplasma infections are without consequence. An emerging body of evidence suggests that the presence of an established chronic infection may contribute to the development of a variety of neurological conditions, including schizophrenia, epilepsy, and neurodegenerative conditions. That's not good. Now, these effects may not be a direct consequence of the parasite, but rather driven by a persistent low level of inflammation in the infected brain, but either way, not good. So, let's explore this new data that's gotten neurologists so worried, and review strategies on how not to get infected in the first place, and what one might be able to do to mediate the effects if you are one of the 1 in 4 Americans that's already infected. Suspicions that infections may play a role in mental health date back more than a century. For example, this editorial from 1896 asking whether insanity might be due to a microbe. Well, for millions of years, parasites have altered the behavior of their hosts. Take, for example, the diabolical effects of the rabies virus, which is usually transmitted through saliva, so it makes sense that the virus taps specifically into the limbic system of the brain, turning its victims from Fido into Cujo, to facilitate transmission of the virus. But brain parasites can do more than just switch behaviors on and off. Some parasites can adaptively take over and completely control the behavior of their hosts, like the famous zombie ants. Dying from an infection with an enslaver fungus that steers their insect host to die perched in just the position that favors the dispersal of fungal spores by the wind. Here's the head of a manipulated ant, colonized by tendrils of the fungus. Ants infected by this fungus die in a dramatic way. Once the ant is positioned just right, dying is preceded by the biting behavior, where ants clamp down onto plant surfaces to keep it stable, while the fungus bursts out of the back of the ant's head and grows this long stalk. Here's a picture. How crazy is that? There are also aquatic parasites that cause their insect host to drown themselves, or others that can cause bees to bury themselves alive, or cause spiders to build special webs. That's these parasitic wasps that lay their eggs into the spider's abdomen, and then right on the night the larva eats its way out, it marionettes the spider to build it a little home. How creepy is that? Okay, but come on. These are insects with simple brains. Surely, brain parasites couldn't affect complex behaviors in higher animals, which brings us to Toxoplasma. Toxoplasma is known to manipulate the behavior of their hosts to increase the probability that the host is captured by a predator. For example, Toxoplasma can reproduce in cats. But how's it going to get itself from the brain of an infected mouse into the cat? It can hijack the mouse's brain and hijack their native inborn fear of the odor of cats into an attraction to that odor. The parasite caused the mouse to develop a fatal attraction to cats, which is good for the parasite, not so good for the mouse. What does this all have to do with human mental illness? That's what we'll explore next.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Greger, for that amazing video on how we can control our mental health through our diet and avoiding pork products. Pork also contains another contaminant, which is curing agents. Now, the pork industry, and particularly processed pork, uses a meat curing agent, most common for pork, called nitrites or nitrates. These gives the bacon, sausages, and hot dogs their moisture, shelf life, and safety from spoilage bacteria. The concentrated chemical is tinted a pink hue, giving your bacon on hot dogs a pink glow, as well as distincting it in the kitchen from regular table salt. Now, the nitrates and nitrates are calculated in their concentration for the type of meat product that you're using, and calculated on how long they're aged before consumption. So this is sort of like a chart saying, okay, from 0 to 2 years, going to add this much chemical additive, and hopefully the water content and a microbial spoilage can be contained until consumption. Now, the toxicity level is unknown for human consumption. The life cycle of this chemical additive is based on the amount of the meat, composition, and type of products that you're making. However, its potential negative effects can cause it to be strictly regulated. There is research that links nitrates to human illness, specifically cancerous nitrosamines that are formed from these nitrates and nitrites. Researchers from Sweden, published in Food Additive and Contaminants Journal, takes a scientific look at nitrites in pork, chicken, and beef products. The total exposure to humans was investigated in various meat samples because of the negative health effects. The research shows the table here of various meat products where nitrite concentrates trail off where the consumer is safe to eat it. The pork sausage was safe to eat after approximately 45 days, and the chicken products take a longer time to reduce in concentration. The researchers concluded that nitrites in pork, red and processed meats are to be limited if consumed at all. The total nitrite amount in the product once cooked and ready to serve does vary and does need to be of concern and attention for children who we especially feed these products to. Now, the last factor in pork and why you should put pork not on your fork is the environmental waste and land destruction. Pork industry is taxing to our environment. There are 3 main reasons why pork is dangerous. Number 1, environmental destruction. Number 2, illegal practices in the pharmaceutical and chemical companies. And number 3, animal disease outbreaks. The animal industry, which pork makes a large percentage of, is a major contributor to the greenhouse global gases. So, greenhouse gases increases our warming of the planet, increases the temperature of the planet, and that is slowly warming our country by a degree or two. The slow warming by a degree or two in the last 20 years has directly caused natural disasters such as more frequent droughts, excessive heat and heat waves, erratic patterns of wind, rain, and snow, flash floodings, hurricanes, and tornadoes and violent windstorms, to name a few. The reality of global warming is brought to our attention with each natural disaster and each passing season. The rainfalls are fewer and fewer and the air is less clean. The soils are less bountiful naturally and require industrial supplementation for its capacity to grow. Last year in the USA, the North and South Carolina regions was hit by a hurricane and a flood, causing these waste pools to overflow due to flooding and seep into our main vein rivers. Now, the pools of sewage and septic that the pork industry uses beside their industry is an open system in which when the water floods, the water can go into these pools and succumb to havoc in all of its environment. The waste is stored in these things called open lagoons, which makes them open to flooding and contamination, which has eventually killed and infected hundreds of people in these areas. The spillage of over 7 million gallons of hog waste in the river in the Carolinas. These wells that provide drinking water for these residents are put at risk from this pork sewage contamination. Now, this is a typical practice of the pork industry and of the animal industry in general to put the sewage in open pools and open lagoons and open pits beside where they grow the animals. So we have the same level of sanitation happening all around the world, if not to a lower level globally. We're just not aware of it by them. The number 2 reason is by the illegal practices of the pharmaceutical and chemical companies. So what's going on now in terms of pork is called ractopamine. Ractopamines are a banned stimulant, a banned chemical additive in pork products in the European Union and in China, but not in North America. They're given to pigs in order to grow faster and for production, and this is causing an import dilemma of the Canadian pork into China, where the traces of ractopamine were found from Chinese officials in Canadian safe pork. Chemical leads to human illness and is of public health concern. However, the discontinuance of laws on these chemicals will continue to allow dirty pork to be served, corners in the processing industry to be cut, and ultimately the consumer suffers. So when some countries allow it and other countries don't, ultimately the consumer suffers. The number 3 reason is animal disease outbreak. There's a new supervirus. New risks to superviruses such as Ebola contamination in our pork industry. The Ebola in pork is going crazy right now in 2019. It has been quickly wiping out hundreds of thousands of pigs around the world, and these farmers find the Ebola, have to slaughter the entire farm just to be safe, quarantine all of them off. Now in China there has been several confirmed cases. The industry doubts that it can be completely contained, and the spread could reach to parts of Southeast Asia and around the world if not under control. The spread of these infected carcasses are not handled with proper sanitation and are dumped into large pits beside sewer tanks. Again, so what they're doing is right beside the open lagoons, they're just tossing the bodies, carcasses, which will eventually go into the soil and in the environment. The degradation of these pork carcasses in the surrounding environments leads us to assume that this will be a future risk for these people in these communities. Alright, that takes us to the end of our video, guys. Thanks so much for watching about pork and why you should not put pork on your fork. If you like this video, like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I Thank you so much for watching my video. Have a great day and keep it vegan, y'all.